after Kingsfall came out and we had the day 1 raid race, I made some videos going over the builds I used that ended up feeling the best during the raid race, and of those, one was my Invincible Warlock endgame build. I had said that the only major downside to using this build was that there wasn't a really good exotic to fit into the mix, and that I wanted Bungie to make an exotic that gave Warlocks double healing grenades, but I think I found an even better option. Yo, what's going on guys? It's G-Miners here, and in this video, I'm going over what I think is one of the top 5 builds in all of Destiny, which is an infinite restoration ×2 build for Warlocks. Not only will this give you insane healing, but you're also going to be able to give it to your entire team, and anyone who is running Solar with just one of the fragments that I'm gonna go over is going to have this healing for an infinite amount of time, as long as they keep getting a few kills here and there. The timing is actually pretty generous, which makes this build much more viable in harder content, where the time to kill is going to be much higher as well. The second nice part with this build is that we will also be getting Radiant, and with this same fragment, we can just maintain this Radiant buff like we can with the healing. This is going to be a 25% weapon damage increase as long as we stay Radiant, which makes the time to kill much lower, even if we're 20 to 25 under power. Since this build does revolve around us getting kills to maintain these buffs, Verity's Brow, which is a kill-based exotic, will be a perfect fit. With this, as long as we get weapon kills that match our subclass type, which will be Solar, we're going to get stacks of increased grenade regen and damage. For us, on healing grenades, the damage is going to be kind of useless, but the regen values go way higher anyways, which is what we're benefiting off of. And the other way that this build is going to end up being a support build is that with Verities, anytime we throw a grenade to heal our teammates or even ourselves, anyone nearby is going to get increased grenade recharge rate as well. And this should be much stronger than even our own regen rate with the exotic. Verities definitely makes this full build come together, and I'm honestly just high-key dumb for not even thinking to use this originally. Nothing is going to be super flashy with this build other than the fact that we can just tank any amount of damage, which is a pretty good sign that it will work in just about any piece of content. So if you guys do enjoy this build and you want to see more like it, make sure to drop a like and sub down below. Subbing's completely free, it helps me out a ton, and you can always unsub later. And with that said, let's take a look at our Solar subclass layout. For our super, we are going to want to be on Well of Radiance. This is just a no-brainer for endgame PvE. I wish Daybreak was better, but you do need kind of a full build to make the super even halfway decent. After that, we are on Healing Rifts. We are going to be getting Radiant 90% of the time, so we're not going to need Empowering Rift. And if we are in damage, we will be inside of a well. So Healing Rifts just help as another support option for our team and should stack with Restoration ×2 to go from 80 HP a second of healing to 120 HP per second. For my melee, I am running Celestial Fire. I've started running this a lot more. To me, it just feels more consistent when I need to proc Radiant. The snap is definitely better for damage and Scorch stacks. I actually just made a full build using the snap, so check that out if you do want to see how strong that can become, because it's honestly broken. And then for our final ability, obviously, make sure you are on Healing Grenades. These apply Cure and Restoration to us and teammates. Cure is going to be an instant amount of health, which is 60 HP, or about a third of our total health pool. And then Restoration is going to be constant healing over time, which is 50 HP per second at base. Our first aspect is going to be the main one that you need on with this build, which is going to be Touch of Flame. This beefs up all of our grenades for the Solar subclass, or at least those native to the original Solar Warlock. So for our healing grenades, these now get increased Cure and Restoration effects. Cure is now Cure ×2. I couldn't see a value for this where I get most of the healing values that I use, so I'm assuming this is now 100 to 120 HP. And then for Restoration ×2, which is what we care about more, this goes all the way up to 80 HP per second. I also like to run Icarus Dash as my second aspect. This is just a quality of life choice to help with my movement. Heat Rises isn't going to be super useful in endgame content unless you have a very specific reason for it, or if you are using it for the melee energy. Fragment-wise, first and most important is going to be Ember of Empyrean. This allows Solar Weapon or Ability Final Blows to extend the duration of both Restoration and Radiance effects. The broken part about this is that we are able to keep ×2 Restoration with this fragment indefinitely, so as long as we pair this with a half-decent Solar Weapon, we're going to tank all types of damage and deal 25% more outgoing damage at all times. I'm also running Ember of Ashes to just apply more Scorch stacks, which will stem from my melee ability and my primary weapon that I choose to run with this build. Ember of Solace is definitely something that you do want to have with this build as well. This gives increased duration of Radiant and Restoration effects, so we will now max out at 12 seconds for both. And then lastly, I have on Ember of Torches. This is what actually gives us the Radiant effect from our melee ability, so this is a must-have if you do want to incorporate the perma 25% damage increase. As I mentioned, you are going to want to have on a solar weapon to get kills. Personally, I think the best option is going to be Callous Mini Tool with the perk Incandescent. This is going to allow us to rapidly get kills to maintain our buffs, because 900 RPM SMGs have been one of the best TTKs in PvE for a while now, and they are also super easy to use. But if you do end up taking this into GMs, I would say any solar weapon that you can reliably get kills with and that has champion mods should also work. As an honorable mention, I will add that Sunshot feels great with the build. You get some extra range and trigger a bunch more explosions, which helps deal extra damage to trash adds. And even if you rock something like Vision of Confluence, this should still feel great at ranges too. Lastly, you will also want to be running Verity's Brow. The exotic perk for this grants stacks of death throws, which is going to provide a grenade damage boost, which we won't really use, and then also increased grenade recharge rate, which we most definitely will use. This is going to be 50% increased regen per stack, and each stack actually lasts a super solid 10 seconds. This is going to cap out at 5 stacks in total, so that's going to be 250% increased regen rate, and this does scale off of our base regen, so more or less discipline makes no difference here. Overall, you are going to worry much more about getting kills to keep Restoration and Radiant procced than you will about death throws, so this doesn't add any increased micromanagement to the build. You might also be wondering why we are using more grenade regen if we already have infinite healing after using a single grenade, and the main reason is just because of realistic situations. Even in any raid encounter with hordes of adds, there is going to be downtime. This downtime will almost always be enough to burn the timer on our Restoration and Radiant effects, but it's usually not enough time to get an entire grenade charge back. So with high discipline and combining that with death throws, we should be able to always have another healing grenade when ours runs out. Perfect example is for players who might be in a rotation like in first encounter of Kingsfall. You might get a few kills, then stop, then a few more, then stop, and so on during the encounter, so being able to keep grenades at nearly 100% uptime is going to be amazing. For the very last section of the video, I wanted to go over mods, but in a different style than just telling you what mods to use. If you guys play endgame content, especially like the content this build is made for, you'll probably know by now that 90% of mods are going to be useless. There are cases for different builds where elemental wells are needed or charged with light stacks must be used, but in general, if you're going into something new, you're going to use a build like this one that is easy to use and works 100% of the time. And with that said, mods are not going to be extremely useful. That said, here are some mods that I would use with the build and the reason to use each of them. First up is High Energy Fire. I would use this with Harmonic Siphon and Taking Charge. This will allow you to go into damage phases and have a damage buff of 20% at all times. It's a great mod for the Golgoroth fight or something like Rolk when you might not have enough wells for each section of damage or wells are just not viable. Font of Might and a way to get solar wells is also great. This, combined with Cataclysmic, will let you hit 25% harder in damage phases. If you are on well for your team, then you will just not be able to utilize the stasis damage strat because you're on solar, so being able to still bump your damage up, even if it isn't for as long or it's not as easy to do, still helps. And then finally, we are going to be rocking Supreme Wellmaker in cases where our team is using stasis for damage. This is only needed if the rest of your team is using Font of Might. You can easily provide them with 3 stasis elemental wells, so they have the 25% damage boost for the entire damage phase. Other than that, throw on whatever mods you want for the mid game, but just know that most of these additional mods are not going to help out in most cases. Elemental wells can be good for regen on your abilities, but the only one of our abilities that have any major downtime is going to be our melee. This was kind of longer than I try to make most of my build videos, but I really wanted to explain all of the parts and synergies that come into play here. I do also stream a bunch over on my Twitch, which is linked below. We're currently doing Val speedruns and some other low mans over there, so definitely come drop by. And if you want, feel free to also join the Discord to get pinged when I go live, or just to come hang out with the community over there. Anyways, that's all for this video, guys. As always, have a good one. Peace.